Hello there, I'm Connor Martin.
And I'm Oren McGuinness.
Welcome to M2 Live. Today on the show we'll be exploring expressionist art, animation and the work of Belfast filmmaker George Clarke.
First up is an interview with local artist Ruben Hughes, who specialises in abstract expressionism.
Ruben has a very distinctive style, both in his art and his dress sense. Let's take a look.
Hi, today we're going to be talking to Ruben, a Year 3 student at Ulster University who's studying abstract expressionism. How do you get in the zone?
Drugs. Drugs.
What is abstract expressionism?
I just think, I don't know, there's a lot of fancy terms and labels that you could throw on it, and a lot of, different ways of thinking. There's automatic painting, there's a lot of different things like that, but I just see it as a pure cathartic release of just freedom and expression and a limitless potential to also just be able to paint. And I don't know, it's a way to work through things, I suppose. It's a way to get your body fully developed into the artwork and use your entire physicality as a form of painting.
What is your favourite art piece from your collection?
Probably the little board one with it's sort of an oil crayon, and it was really fun to do. I don't know what it means or what it's about, but I just like how it looks and think it's very cool. I suppose they all have like indirect exposures of, what I think about, and when I'm done after, I can sort of analyse it and say, oh, that could have been that or that could have been that. But at the time of painting, it fully is just unconscious, free-forming thought, and a lot of it's just sporadic, and I think that's the best way to make art. I use a lot of different techniques and a lot of different things to sort of get focus, but I also think being completely unfocused is another way to make art, because, I don't know, boredom and normality is part of a life, and why would you not demonstrate that? Not everything has to be inspired, so I like to also be boring and like to be not inspired, because it's generally how I feel.
How do you want people to feel when they look at your artwork?
I'm not sure. I don't really think I care about how people feel whenever they look at my art. I do my own work for my own release and my own nature and my own everything. How other people see it's completely up to them, and I'm not fully bothered.
What is the best thing about being an artist?
The early commute, I don't know. I suppose the ability to make something and, have it your own, and you have your own sort of style and your own personality through your artwork, and being able to call something your own's cool, and being able to, have a form of expression. A lot of other people don't really seem to have that now, so it's cool.
What has been the high point of your career so far?
Probably being able to sell a painting to another student who goes here, another member of staff for a wee bit, called Justa, who's a really fantastic artist, and I respect her artwork a lot. And being able to sell a painting to her was very cool and humbling, because she was my favourite artist, and still is my favourite artist at the moment. Spooked art on Instagram is where I make all my t-shirts and do a lot of figurative drawing and album covers and stuff like that, and I'm a lot more proud of that than sort of my paintings, so I'd plug that.
That was Ruben Hughes there, the punk rock painter. So we have with us now local artist Gordon. Hi, Gordon.
Hello. Abstract work, like what we just saw there, it sort of forces us to ask the question, what is art? How would you define the term, Gordon?
I define art as something that it makes you feel. It's all about emotions, I think. So art is so broad that it can be anything. I think as long as someone's putting their emotions into something, I think it's classed as art then. I think, so I would say like realism and abstract, they're kind of the same thing, so they are. It's just about someone putting their emotions on the paper and stuff.
So you wouldn't say that the level of sort of technique or the complexity of the process, that's not really relevant to you, it's just...
Definitely not. I think the talent is conveying your emotions to the viewer. I don't believe that talent is how realistic it can be or how abstract it can get. It's all preference.
So what about you yourself, Gordon? What made you decide to become an artist?
I've always just been really fascinated with colour, just colouring books, TV shows, cartoons. I was just always drawn to colour, and I think that's just really translated down in art. So it has. I just know what colours and stuff. I'm like.
Who would have been some artists that influenced you like early on? Like who would be some of your favourites?
Michelangelo, a big one. So he is. He's been an artist I've always looked up to. He's an artist that I see myself going towards. I just like the way he paints his figures and stuff. It's just something that I only translate into my own work, so I do.
Yeah, like so how do you apply, like what kind of lessons have you learned from his work that you try to bring to your own stuff?
I think learning, his figures are never perfectly proportioned. So they're not, if you look at them, they're always very muscular, they're very like, the bodies are always like
Veiny, kinda.
bigger and stuff than their heads and stuff. So I kind of learned like it's not really about the proportions, it's kind of about what way you want to convey this person.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now we have a wee statistic here from the National Museum of Women in the Arts, which says that while 51% of artists working today are women, there's only about 70, in major galleries, about 78% of the artists featured are male. So I suppose I'd have sort of two questions for you there. Do you feel that you've benefited from being a man in the arts, and what do you think should be done to address that inequality?
I definitely have like benefited from being a male in the art. I think they kind of. I think we should start incorporating like women's safe spaces in art. Up until the 18th century, women weren't seen as artists, so they weren't. So women have had an unfair advantage in the art world. So I think having safe spaces for women, I think, and letting women create women's spaces, galleries and stuff, and kind of let them just have their own, they tell their own stories. Don't have men tell women's stories, and let women tell their own stories.
I think we've got just time for one more quick wee question. Have you got any upcoming projects that you're excited about that you'd like people to know?
I'm going on to do my master's, so if anyone sees
okay,
my
congrats.
end of year master's show, definitely come and support.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming on.
Gordon,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate it. So we're going to dive now into a bit of a different medium. So we're going to be going into the world of animation with the students of Ulster University. Now please be aware that this next video contains flashing images.
Hi, we are here today at Ulster University's Belfast campus. We are taking a close look at animation and how it can be used as a tool for storytelling. We will also be focusing in on Ulster University's animation course in the art school. We are joined by a lecturer, Henry Melky, to discuss animation and the course.
I can always go back and thinking about how I really love characters and characters act, or how characters act as a very efficient tool for storytelling, as a very efficient tool or powerful tool in being a general or universal archetype that draws us all together and connects us all together in terms of whatever emotion the story is trying to convey. I find that in animation to be very, very interesting, especially in my area.
Joining Henry are two students of the animation course, Jasmine and Chloe.
I really like the interpretation of story and how it can be played into anything. So like the community just making something from scratch that is going to connect to like a mass amount of people that they'll also love. It's just something really cool about that, and I think that's why I went for animation, kind of like community-based stuff.
But animation does a really good job of depicting like hard issues to kids and stuff. Like cartoons alone down south do really good like emotional tales, but they do them in a way that kids can understand and like register the important topics.
So animation plays a really important role on different levels. On an individual level, it plays a really interesting role in conveying ideas, sharing perspectives, So it acts as well as not only as a design tool for communication, but also as an art tool for expression, self-expression, for creativity. It can be used also for therapeutic purposes. A lot of people, I can see that even if they are amateur animators, they can use this approach or this medium to convey or express their emotions, their ideas, their identity. Flexibility and openness towards the students to discover the area that they're interested in, because animation is a very broad area. So that way we provide the students with the core knowledge on how to progress and become or how to become independent, to self-guide or self-direct themselves in the area that they specialize in.
Let's see what the students have made.
Some very interesting work being done there in Ulster's animation department. We're now joined by Jasmine Shepherd, who works in animation. Hiya.
Right, Jasmine. So Jasmine, what started your interest up in animation?
Yeah, so whenever I was young, I watched all like Cartoon Network, Scooby-Doo, all the good cartoons.
All the classics.
Yeah, all the classics. And then when I was a wee bit older, I started watching like Japanese anime, like specifically Studio Ghibli. Really love all the Studio Ghibli films. They're just a really good example of like combining beautiful art with storytelling. So I always loved that, and then I always loved drawing. I've always had like a passion for art, and I originally started doing screen production down at Belfast Met. So that's where I started, and sorry, I found that wasn't really right for me 100%. So then I sort of thought it would be best to combine my love of drawing and talent with my love of film and TV. So that's when I decided animation was probably going to be the right way to go.
Oh, brilliant stuff.
And those early influences you mentioned, obviously starting with like the Cartoon Network stuff and then the Studio Ghibli films, would that still be what influences your work now?
Interestingly, I actually am more of a 3D artist now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I originally started in 2D and we did some 2D work in first year, but because our course is quite 3D heavy, we would do a lot of like modeling, sculpting, and 3D animation as well. So it was sort of like a natural progression for myself to sort of become more versed in 3D. And I still do love drawing. I still love the 2D, and any 2D drawing I do, it is still influenced by Studio Ghibli, especially.
Would you prefer, what would you prefer more doing? Like, would you prefer doing 3D more now, even though it's newer? Would you just like to do what you did with the 2D, if you could pick?
I do prefer the 3D now,
Yeah?
actually. Yeah, interestingly, it's kind of strange because I'm quite famously cursed with computers, so I would have a lot of like trouble with software and like things would shut down whenever I hadn't told them to. But I'm finding ways to like adapt to that now, and it's really interesting now. And
That's really cool. Now, sort of speaking of like a lot of the technology that's used nowadays, something we hear a lot about is AI. There's worries that it could start to replace workers in creative industries, and that certainly applies to animation as much as anything else. What's your take on AI? Does it worry you? Do you think it has some good points? What do you think of it?
I think that AI has really good benefits in certain areas, so like medicine and everything that's like related to that. I think it's got really great advancements, but I think it's unnecessary in a creative field because we already have people who have learned those skills and like crafted their passion into making all these things like TV, film, and all that. And I feel like it just takes away the jobs of people. I don't think AI is quite at the point now where it could be fully taking the jobs of everyone. I feel like it's not quite advanced enough for that.
Okay.
But there's definitely a worry that in the future it will become advanced enough that people will think, or specifically like companies and people who the bottom line is the important thing will think, well, we can hire someone to do the AI in 5 minutes, so why would we spend all this money on hiring someone to do it hand-drawn or on digital art? And that's a worry, because that takes away the creative field. And if you have nowhere to put your passion, then what job are you going to end up doing?
100%. Of course. No, I don't know if you've noticed the pictures we have here in the studio. Both of these were actually AI generated. That there was no human involvement in creating those, which I certainly wouldn't have thought when I first saw them. We've actually got a wee game to play with regards to that. If you have a look at those pictures there. Now we've got 6 pictures there. Only one of them is human generated. The rest are AI. Do you think you can pick out which one is the real one?
Have a real think and a good look, because it took me a while to know myself.
What are you thinking? Which one?
Well, I think 5 might be hand drawn or like digital art. I don't think 5's AI, but
okay.
I would say 6
the black
maybe?
and white there?
Yeah, that's the black and white one.
Okay. It's actually the picture of the whale there, number 2, is actually the only real one. Yeah. I know, it just goes to show you how advanced the technology is getting. It's hard, even for an artist, it's hard to tell which is which.
It's a very creepy, strange vibe, because if that's what's like now, they even think what it'll be like in 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a very odd thing. But it's madness to me.
Yeah, apparently one good way to tell is the AI loves lines of third symmetry.
Oh, right, yeah.
But anyway, sorry, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us, Jasmine. That was brilliant.
So now we have a bit of an interview with local independent filmmaker George Clark. Among other things, he's well known for having directed the martial arts / zombie classic, The Battle of the Bone. So let's see what he has to tell us.
I've always been inspired by film, absolutely. As you can see in here, there's 4,000 movies. That has been my passion. It's also growing up, and this is such a cliche, growing up with nothing. You could only ever dream of going to learn this kind of craft. It's never been a part of our family life. It's never been something that has ever happened. So to want to be able to change that for yourself, change your own direction, and do something different and make something of yourself, you don't need a degree to follow your dream. That's kind of always been my thing, and that's why Yellow Fever Productions was pulled together to allow people who didn't have that chance to go to university, who didn't have a degree behind them, like myself, but had that dream of wanting to do something. Knowing that Battle of the Bone is 15 years old already scares the life out of me, but in those 15 years the Northern Ireland film scene has really only just taken off. When we made Battle of the Bone, we filmed in locations that are now studios. They weren't studios when we filmed there. People were saying, don't make this movie, you're going to get in trouble. You're making a movie about the Troubles, you're making a movie about 2 different sides getting together. It's unheard of, you know. It fast, like all over the world, became the most media covered film ever made in the country, and that has really only been surpassed recently by Game of Thrones and things like that. For little us who hadn't any experience, to get this level of coverage was just insane. After the success of Battle of the Bone and it going out to America and winning an award at a festival, I wanted to now start a festival when I came home. So I had to make a movie, because I thought, wouldn't it be great to premiere one of our movies at our festival every year as a thank you to all the filmmakers that come along? Right, okay, we need a movie. So I write, splash area, we don't have the ability to film it. We had to stop. We shot for a week. Then I wrote the knackry over dinner. Everyone who turned up the next morning to start shooting splash area again were whisked away to a whole new set and put into new character modes. Here's your script, let's go, we're doing this. 4 weeks, shot, edited, completed, for 120 quid, just like that. When you're making movies with no money, nothing is always going to go right. You don't want to be wasting time, you don't want to be wasting that moment that you have to shoot something. So to be able to create something new that you know is going to change your direction of script, but still might work for the best, you don't have the budget, it all comes down to creativity. My last project to date has been Mindy Has to Die, which is an adaptation of my friend Jeff Strand's novella. We adapted that into a screenplay. We started shooting about 5, maybe 6 years ago, and pretty much got about 80% of the movie shot. And then my dad took very ill. 2 years passed. I thought, right, I need to come up with something. So I wanted to show the film at the next festival. Screened it at the festival. It went down a treat. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. I guess what I've been trying to find is my mojo again. Been working on a documentary called The Decade of Dreams that kind of looks back at my first 10 years of Yellow Fever, of creating, of making movies. And I don't want it to be my only 10 years of making movies. I want it to inspire me to get back out there. And I think in the process of trying to make that, I'm already starting to do that.
Joining us now is Ulster University lecturer Stephen Baker, who has written extensively on representations of Northern Ireland in film and on television. Stephen, what do you make of Battle of the Bone as a depiction of Northern Ireland on screen?
I mean, it's really interesting because it's kind of utopian, you know, when you think about the politics of this place. So this kind of notion that somehow this other threat arrives in the shape of the undead, in the shape of these zombies, and that it manages to unite the two historically antagonistic tribes here is what's hard to imagine, except in the sort of context of a kind of zombie film. But there is a history in many ways of kind of using horror films and zombie films and that sort of genre to explore circumstances of national trauma. You know, that the zombie film itself becomes a way in which to explore that, something which otherwise might have been hard to talk about or hard to give any kind of representation to. Yeah. So why not zombies, you know?
May as well.
Definitely. What did you think of the kind of, as far as I know, have those two genres ever been mixed before, kung fu and zombies?
Yeah, it is a very unique one you don't hear much of.
Do you know, I'm not aware of ever sort of seeing it before, you know, so there's a degree of novelty in that as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and would you say as well, like, I know that horror has historically been, like, there's some previous instances of it being used to, like, explore political themes. Would you say George Clark's kind of tapping into that tradition there?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back even to sort of the old George Romero zombie films, it was clear that you know, while they were very often regarded as sort of part of a kind of low culture, that they were trying to deal with some quite serious political and some serious social issues as well. You know, that they were films about an American society trying to think about and come to terms with questions of affluence and consumerism. And so you sort of envisage the alarm at that society in the shape of the undead and the zombie. And the zombie is kind of unthinking and unreasonable kind of consumer, which if it consumes you, you then as a consequence become like them. So the idea is not to allow that to happen to you. But you can see it even more recently in something like The Walking Dead, which is precisely the kind of television drama which, you know, before the kind of political garboils that we've seen across the world and in the US, was beginning to signal the fact that there was something going on in America, and if you had your ear to the kind of cultural ground, you could hear it coming at you. You know, so you've got what is essentially a kind of a television drama story about Rick Grimes, who's this kind of cowboy sheriff figure, who's trying to lead his settlers to some sort of safety, surrounded by these marauding zombies. And in that context, it's kind of like an American Western in reverse, you know, where actually what Rick Grimes represents is the kind of attempt to try to form a protective zone around you, and the zombies replace what in the past would have been the old Indians coming to get you. So it plays with the iconography of that. And so there again, you get sort of a cross between an American Western and also a kind of zombie film, that kind of generic hybridity, which becomes a way of talking about something which otherwise might be quite difficult to talk about, quite traumatic. How do you deal with it? And the genre provides you with a kind of vehicle to do that in.
So, Stephen, how do you think Battle of the Bone would compare to, like, its own independent film? How do you think it would compare to bigger budget things that have been filmed here, such as Line of Duty or Blue Lights or even Belfast?
I mean, those are the big budget ones you've mentioned, and the thing about that is, you know, they're driven by a kind of set of commercial imperatives. Somebody somewhere wants to make money with that or to achieve audience figures. The interesting thing about something like Battle of the Bone and other films which are made with kind of lower budgets and very often made by people who are they're enthusiasts. They want to make a film. you know, you want to have space for that in a film culture. You want to have somewhere where people who just are enthusiastic about films can do that. Also a space where you can begin to incubate some kind of new talent. I mean, one of the things you notice is a young Shane Todd appears in Battle of the Bones. So you want somewhere where people aren't thinking about, is this going to make me money? They're thinking about, you know, is this going to be fun? Or can we do something innovative in this space? Can we do something creative there? Because the consequence of not having that is that you end up with a film culture which is basically driven by, can we make money out of this? And maybe the best way to make money is we just repeat the formula that worked the last time. There's nothing else like Battle of the Bone. You know, it's not comparable with anything else really here. And I suspect if somebody had been sort of sitting down and thinking, let's do this for money, you wouldn't have come up with that.
No.
So do you think that's a case of all the sort of big studio money coming in? Do you think that is having a negative effect on the indie scene? Or I could see there being an argument for, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships, and there's just generally more film activity here, and that must be a good thing for creativity.
It does. In a way, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you know, it's a great thing that we have the kind of film production here, because we didn't have it a lot of years ago. You go back when I was a student in the 90s, there really wasn't a film industry here at all. So the fact that there's one now that exists, that's a good thing. Because the good thing about it is it produces people who have the opportunity to train and develop their skills. It also gives you kind of an infrastructure as well that you wouldn't previously have had. And film gets taken seriously in a kind of economic sense that it wouldn't have happened before. But it's important also that you don't develop those skills and that infrastructure purely for the benefit of corporations from elsewhere. When do people from here get an opportunity to have their voice heard, to use those, to tell their own stories through it? So as I said, it's kind of double-edged in that sort of sense. Yes, it's good because you've got the infrastructure and skills, but it's important also that you use that infrastructure and those skills to give people here a voice. And that's the space of Battle of the Bone in some respects, for the enthusiasts, for people who want to surprise you and delight you with something you wouldn't have maybe seen otherwise.
100%. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Stephen.
Pleasure.
That was fascinating stuff. Well, it was an interesting show, Ginty, wasn't it?
It was very interesting. Enjoyed
Yes,
it.
we learned about what art is, what it isn't.
It is. Stephen taught us how important zombies are to the peace process.
And Kung Fu, can't forget that one.
And we also learned that AI is going to take all our jobs in a few years.
I know. But hopefully the AI that replaces us will do a better job than we have presenting the show.
I don't think that's too hard, Connor.
No, I don't think so at all. Well, that's all we've got time for today.
As always, he's Martin.
He's McGuinness.
And this has been M2 Live. Thanks so much for watching.
Goodbye.